So this gallery is from pictures from the 1960s of Master on tour in India. And going on tour was a very large part of Master Kirpal's work. He traveled widely across northern India with occasional trips down south to as far as Bombay. And he was visiting satsangis, religious leaders, holding satsang, giving initiation. He visited both of the major cities and went into deep into rural areas. He said, I'm quoting from Master, quote, I travel around India, north, east, south, and west. I usually remain at the ashram about half of the month, and the rest of the month is spent in touring. I don't go of myself. I see something is dragging me to go. We are not going out of our own free will for pleasure or for seeing things. Only He brings about these things. It is God who takes work from us. And Master would generally travel by car, rarely traveling, but occasionally by train. And he had two cars at the ashram, a 1957 Studebaker station wagon and a small Indian ambassador sedan. Here you see a picture of the Studebaker. And as commonly occurred when he was traveling, the luggage was piled high on the roofs, driven by the two. And the cars were driven by the two Savadar drivers, Ram Sarup and Mohan. And here's Master in the Indian car, the ambassador. The gentleman getting into the driver's seat was Ram Sarup, Master Drivers. He was a great devotee before he got initiated of Tulsi's Ramayana, and he memorized virtually the entire epic poem, which is many thousands of verses. And when he drove, he would often sing from sections of the poem, sometimes at Master's request. And then the Master would ask Ramsrup to, quote, give his satsang, unquote. And as he sang, he might insert his own comments, things like, everywhere that Rama went, the Lord put the clouds over his head to protect him from the sun. Just like that, the Master has put his clouds over Ramsarup to protect him. He didn't speak very much English, but the Westerners knew him well because he's known for his sweetness and his love. The other driver that Master used was Mohan. Like many other close Savadars, he was originally initiated by Master Sant Singh at a young age, and he lived at Sawan Ashram with his wife, serving Master throughout his mission. Master would almost always be accompanied by Taiji when he was traveling in India. She would cook his food and serve as his personal attendant. Here you see him. I think this is in Rishikesh. And Master was usually at Taiji's insistence. He would struggle to get him to stop and take some food. Here's another picture of him somewhere in India traveling with Taiji there. The other person who would often travel with Master on a regular basis was his putty or chanter. And it was Masterji, known as Masterji. Here he is sitting on Master's left. And during satsang, he'd lead the Sangat in singing bhajans and chant the verses. And sometimes he would travel independently by train, meeting Master at whatever destination he was going to. And this is a cute picture of the Studebaker, and that's Masterji taking a little rest in the back seat, staying out of the sun, while you can see Ram Sarup up front working on the engine. The pictures we have from Master on Tour really began in 1962 for the most part. And Lucille Gunn, you see her standing next to Taiji over on the left of the picture with a smile on her face. She was an early initiate of Master Kirpal from Southern California. And she spent several months with him in 1962. And Russell Jacques was really the first person to visit Master and that we know of, Western in 1958, but he did not go on tour with him that we're aware of that he talked about. And some of these photos were taken by uh, Lucille. Beautiful picture of Master. Another picture of Lucille with the Master somewhere traveling, I believe. She talked, one time she wrote about this, traveling with the Master. At one time, Master was just passing through a village, and hundreds had gathered, knowing he was coming that way. Some had walked for 5, 10, and even 15 miles away, even though they knew he would be there only for a few minutes. The Master was talking to them as they were quietly and reverently gazing upwards at him. All of a sudden, acting in unison, as if they were one person, there was an enthusiastic and happy hurrah, accompanied by a lively hand clapping. I asked what it was all about. This was the first time I'd heard hand clapping in India, and I was told that Master had said, I have renounced the world and given up everything, and I have nothing to give you but my love. Where else would you find such evident gratitude and receptivity of his great love, but with these humble village folks? The next set of photos here are from 1965. In 1965, Master invited many of his Western disciples, who were still relatively few at the time, to attend. And following the conference, those Western disciples who came, he took them to his house in Dehradun, the house on Rajpur Road. And while there, they also traveled to Rishikesh and Mussoorie, which is a hill town, which was only about 20 miles from Dehradun, both of those, and also to Hardwar, which was further away. And this is really the first time a group of Westerners had traveled with Master. And this is Russell's first trip. It's the first trip of almost everybody in that group to visit Master in India. Perhaps it was the first time. Russell wrote, the final day we made a trip to Missouri, 7,000 feet up in the Himalayas. For me, the day's events marked a dream come true. For when I first became aware that masters existed 8 years ago, it was always in connection with the Himalayas. Now, as I watched Master moving about in front of the backdrop of unbelievable snow-capped ruggedness, I realized I was with a great master in India, in the Himalayas. Did I ever think that day so long ago that it would ever be? And with the master, truly a master like this one, is not possible to imagine. He can only be experienced. This is a beautiful picture of Master in 1966. In 1966, Layla and Jim Howard and their baby, Mary Howard, who's in that picture, spent 5 months with the Master in India, a lot of the time at Sawan Ashram. But in December 1966, Master invited them to accompany him, all three of them, on an 18-day tour, including Bombay. And that's where this picture was taken, in the train. And this family, she writes a long article about this in a couple of satsandeshas. But they shared the train compartment with Master and Taiji for 34 hours straight. They were sitting, she wrote, we were sitting opposite Master and Taiji. Master's going over a manuscript of a book he's writing and reading a book about Kabir, this picture here, in which he sometimes takes notes. Taiji often brings out food. She gives it to Master, who cuts it up or just touches it and gives it to Mary, Jim, and me in a most loving and gracious way. One time, when Master was correcting some papers and Mary was playing across from him, Master said to her, you are playing with your toys. I am playing with my work. When Jim takes the photo of Mary sitting in her guru's lap, Master glances over to me and says, smiling, lion cub. And then she talks about the train trip. The word goes around that a great saint is on the train. So Master is getting visits either from travelers or train personnel. A very young soldier comes in and sits at the Master's feet on the floor of the compartment. Master answers all his questions quietly and kindly. 3 days later, the same young soldier gets a private initiation in Master's room, right at his feet. At different stops along the way, many satsangis were awaiting Master to step out to them on the platform for a moment or two. They brought food to be blessed and flower gardens, which, however, Master never accepts, but put around the neck of the giver. At the end of the train trip, Master says to us, "So you have had a 34-hour darshan. Not even Taiji has this, only when she goes with me to Bombay." And there in the archive, there's some other pictures of this trip, including a beautiful account by L. Gurney Parrott about his initiation in Bombay on that same trip in December 1966. In 1967, Aaron Stevens visited India, and he stayed there for 7 months. And he joined Master on his tours during these visits. He was a young man at the time and really enjoyed being immersed in rural India and the Indian culture. But he wrote about his stay, and he gave an itinerary for 5 months that Master traveled in 5 months. And it really demonstrates just the remarkable energy and vigor of the Master, who was then in his 70s. And this is a sort of an outline. In February, he went on a 2-week tour of Agra, Indore, Ujjain, Baroda, Ajmer, Dantal village. He came back, and then in March, he did a 10-day tour of Western Rajasthan, numbering a number of cities, including Ganganagar. And I often wonder in this trip in March in 1967, whether that was the time that Master went and gave initiation to Sanchi, because that was in 1967 that Sanchi got initiated in Rajasthan. And Aaron writes how he was in Ganganagar, and Master made him stay in the city for the day, and Master went off on his own to somewhere he didn't know where it was or what where he was visiting. He left Aaron and then went off from Ganganagar to visit someone. In April, he went to the Punjab, stopping in several places all across the Punjab. In May, he went up to Kashmir, which is a long drive, again for 10 days, 2 weeks. And in June, he went to Hardwar, Rishikesh, and several days at his house in Dehradun. So this is the type of schedule that Master would keep. As he wrote, he was on the road about 50% of the time, visiting villages and cities and satsangis. And so Aaron got to travel with Master as he went out. And this is really a very remarkable account of this. This was taken. There's Master and Master G and the Putty in a small rural village called Dantal. And let me read the account of this visit. The Master was expected in a small farming village, Dantal, 60 miles from the highway, across an inconceivably tortuous dirt path through farmland. The dust plumes kicked up by our rapidly moving car rose high into the air, signaling the countryside that the Master was fast approaching. Dust covered the car, but we had glimpses of beautiful farmland. Hardy farmers could be seen behind their plows, working their faithful oxen and camels, while other men and women dressed in vivid robes toiled side by side. The deeper we plunged into the countryside, the more the peasant folk, seeing the Master's car, would drop their plows in the fields and run as fast as their legs would carry them in his direction, as it dawned upon them that at last he had come. Looking through the car's rear window, we could see a whole flock of men, women, and children running after the Master's car, great smiles on their radiant faces. After passing through several hamlets, we arrived at a beautiful village nestled at the foot of a timeless mountain. Almost instantly, the car was surrounded by hundreds of eager ones, bowing low in reverence before the Master. Mohan, Master's always cheerful driver, announced that the whole village, except for a very few, were all initiates of the Master, some 500. This is from an account in there, and it was published in Sant August of 1970. He goes on, finally the car came to a halt. The crowds were so thick that it was necessary to push to keep up with the master in order not to be swept away by the river-like human mass. We followed in his footsteps up the steep rocky lane. At the summit of the foothill, Master paused and mounted a flight of dilapidated stairs, entering a tiny, darkened building. I managed to squeeze through the crowd into the cool, dark room where Master was speaking endearingly to a man lying prone under a mosquito netting. The man exclaimed in Hindi to Master, "It's because of my bad karma that I am bedridden." He'd been bedridden for 14 years. But through my good karma, the Master has come. This disciple, Pandit Darshan Saint Das, was very learned and well known for his exemplary humility and devotion. Before we took leave of our dear brother, lying there physically helpless but spiritually awakened, Master said, "It is for his sake that I have come all the way here." And here's another picture of Master at that same village that on this trip. As we drove away, Master's car was again pursued by villagers. Turning around in his front seat, Master said, "These people are simple. God is simple, and he, the Master, is simple too." During his last visit here, Master conveyed initiation instructions to several hundred aspirants. During the initiation, a group of 75 accumulated outside and begged to be initiated. The Master interrupted the initiation and had the new group sit in a separate room. Meanwhile, another group of farmers from outlying districts arrived and also begged to be initiated. Again, interrupting the initiation, he had the third group sit for instructions. Then he went to the first group, completed the first part of instructions, put them into meditation, went to the second group, and the third, and so on. As we drove along, I asked the Master how many of these simple villages saw the radiant form of the Master at initiation. He replied, 99 out of 100. There was only one man who could not see. Astonished, I asked again, "The radiant form?" He answered, "Yes." This is from a series of pictures were taken by Jonas Gerard. He visited India in 1969 with his wife Judith and their young baby. And this picture, again, I'll read an account by Jonas. In August 1969, Master made a short visit to Agra. Somewhere along the crossroads, in the middle of nowhere, a group of satsangis from a number of nearby villages has set up a tent, provided a chair for the Master by the side of the road, and were eagerly awaiting for him, even though he was not scheduled to stop. They counted on him being pulled up short by the bonds of love. And they were right. He was very pleased and happy to see his children waiting for him, and he sat and talked and joked with them like any father would do. I had never seen him so happy and jolly before, nor had I seen any disciples quite so eager for his company as these very simple people. What he said was in Hindi. There was no translation, no microphones. Except for the car that had brought us, it could have been a scene out of the Middle Ages. Later, Jonas writes, as we were preparing to leave, we discovered that the Studebaker would not start. Master inquired what was wrong, and I recalled Mohan saying, "Maharaji, distributor," among other things. Ram Sarup dumped the Coca-Cola bottle full of water over the entire electrical system, and incredibly, the car started. Jonas went on tour later in that fall while he was there with Akira and Robert Radine, Michael Rayson, and some others. And these were pictures taken from that trip, including a stop in Firozpur, which was a town somewhere. And Master, he's with this gentleman here, this local gentleman that he was sitting with and at this visit. was the head of the Radhaswami Sangha in the area, and I think that's one of the groups from Agra. And Master was, they had a very sweet together. And this was actually a visit to a school for the blind, and there's a movie that was taken of this visit. Here you see the Westerners traveling with Master, along with Ram Saru, Master G, little tea break on the trip. Michael Grace and Judith Webb. They also went to Golden Temple in Amritsar. They made a visit to Amritsar. And whoever was there took another movie. And Kira Radin wrote extensively about this particular tour. So there's a little story here that they had to tell.
When we arrived in Amritsar, Master arranged for us all to go see the Golden Temple. Now, no one in our group really wanted to go there except for Bob, who was not only willing, he was overjoyed. But for the rest of us, these were Master's wishes, and so they were orders, and off we all drove. Back in Sawanashram, Mira had told us how the building of the Golden Temple started, and how it is a replica of the unearthly heavenly white and gold temple that Guru Ram Das beheld in Daswandwar as he stood there on the shores of a wondrous lake of nectar. And I remember thinking right then how thrilling it would be to see even this physical plane replica. When we arrived, we beheld a deep blue lake as smooth as the sky above, sparkling amidst an array of buildings. In the center was a magnificent temple. On the white marble walls of the first floor rested the golden walls of the second floor, and these were all covered in fretwork and mosaic. The large and small golden domes shone and glittered in the rays of the sun reflecting in a watery mirror. Later, we saw the Master as he unhurriedly moved towards us, and once again, with a thrill in our hearts, we beheld his glowing countenance and his royal bearing. Quietly, he reviewed and looked at our group, just as a kind, concerned father would. And then, turning to me, he whispered sweetly, "The secret lies in attention."
Another pictures this time, and very sweet pictures here. Master's visiting another Indian holy person, and Master very humbly is just sitting on the floor while the other person sits on his bed. And that's Judith Gerard there. There's Master with the in the another view of that same room. Mira Gerard is the baby. The end of 1969, Russell also went back to India and joined this group, and they went up to visit Maharishi Raghavacharya in Rishikesh. And Russell wrote about this. He said, 112 years old in 1969, this great yogi gave every indication of being a man of 65. Master treated Raghavacharya as a good friend, and Raghavacharya did take initiation from the master and publicly acknowledged him as his guru. The master never treated him other than as an equal. To be with these two giants together was the encounter of a lifetime, and a few orders more difficult to obey than that afternoon when he sent us off to Rishikesh to sightsee so that he could be alone with Raghavacharya. How I wanted to stay, but I went as we all did, and I had a thoroughly miserable time. It's another picture of Russell and the other Westerners, Jonas, Judith, Michael Rayson, at Master's house in Dehradun. And Russell wrote about a experience he had there. He said, on the last morning in Dehradun, I left my room at dawn and went down to the back of the retreat where the view of the Himalayas was spectacular. It was a popular place for us to meditate. Master was also very fond of that place and often sat there. I was enjoying a sweet meditation when suddenly I was pulled out. I looked up and saw the master standing there. I was overjoyed. He looked concerned. He asked me if I wasn't cold. I said I was wonderful, especially now that he was there. He smiled and left. I went back to my meditation. The sweetness within, now doubled by the sweetness without. A half hour or so later, I was again pulled out, this time by Mohan, who was standing there with a tall glass of hot chai. He cleared his throat and apologized for disturbing me, but the master had sent me this tea. Again, overjoyed, I begged him to thank the master for me and slowly savored my prasad tea while gazing at the incredibly beautiful Himalayas and reflecting on the sweet, sweet love of the master that expressed itself equally in great big things and in little, little things. I had never been happier. So that ends the pictures that we'll show today. There's many more, well over 150 to 200 photos from the 1960s on the Sant website. And please take the opportunity to take a look at that and many other wonderful stories.